In the late 1990s, a ruthless gang of predators turned the city of Kunming into a hunting ground. They did not just rob, they executed police officers in broad daylight, stole military-grade weaponry, and in one truly nightmarish instance, cooked the remains of a victim to feed their guard dogs. This is the story of China's most cold-blooded police killers. If you appreciate deep-dive investigations into international true crime, please subscribe to support the channel. The old saying goes that the mouse fears the cat and the thief fears the police. It is the natural order of the underworld. Criminals operate in the shadows, fleeing at the first sign of a flashing siren. But in the city of Kunming, in the southern province of Yunnan, that natural order was violently inverted. For a period of 3 bloody years, a specific group of men did not run from the law. They hunted it. The nightmare began on a quiet day in April 1997. The setting was a nondescript parking lot in Kunming, a bustling city known as the City of Eternal Spring. A passerby, going about their daily routine, noticed something out of place. A rugged Jeep had been parked in the same spot for an unusually long time. It was dusty, silent, and motionless. What drew the witness's attention, however, was not the vehicle itself, but the fact that one of the doors was not fully latched. It sat slightly ajar, a dark gap in the metal frame. Driven by instinct and curiosity, the passerby approached the vehicle. As they peered through the gap in the door, the mundane atmosphere of the parking lot shattered. Inside, slumped in an unnatural position, lay the body of a man. The witness recoiled and immediately contacted the authorities. When the Kunming police arrived, the air was thick with the tension of a homicide investigation. Detectives cordoned off the area, their cameras flashing against the grim interior of the Jeep. The victim was identified as Yang Tianyong, a taxi driver. It appeared he had been dead for some time. The crime scene told a brutal story, but it was a story that did not quite make sense. Yang Tianyong's body had been dragged from the driver's side into the rear of the vehicle. A smear of dried blood on the door frame marked the path of his final movement. He was a man of average build, standing about 5 feet 9 inches tall, but he had been completely overpowered. Forensic analysis revealed a savage 2-stage attack. First, there was a massive blunt force injury to the back of his head. The impact was severe, suggesting he had been struck from behind with tremendous power, while he was likely distracted, perhaps arranging luggage or cargo in the back seat. This blow alone would have been enough to incapacitate him instantly. But the killer was not satisfied with merely knocking him out. The coroner found multiple stab wounds on the victim's torso. After Yang Tianyong had collapsed, helpless and unconscious, the assailant had drawn a dagger and finished the job with lethal precision. The motive appeared, at first glance, to be robbery. The victim's pockets were empty, and no valuables were found in the car. The detectives surmised that the killer had taken the money and fled. However, seasoned investigators know that robbery homicides are usually messy and frantic. This felt different. This felt cold. Detectives dug into Yang Tianyong's life, looking for a reason why someone would want him dead. He had been driving a taxi for nearly 4 years, a job that exposes a person to all walks of life. Yet, his background was remarkably clean. He was a migrant from another province. A man who kept his head down and worked hard. He had no gambling debts, no illicit affairs, and no known feuds. The police interviewed his neighbors and his fellow drivers, hoping to find a secret enemy, but they found nothing. Yang Tianyong was a ghost in the criminal system, a man with no reason to be murdered. This lack of personal motive forced the police to look closer at the physical evidence. The medical examiner made a chilling observation about the blow to the victim's head. The shape and severity of the fracture suggested that the weapon was not a common street tool. It was not a rusted pipe or a piece of lumber found in a nearby alley. The wound pattern was consistent with a specialized, heavy object, possibly a military-grade tool or a piece of tactical equipment. This detail lingered in the minds of the investigators. A random robber rarely carries specialized weaponry, but despite their best efforts, the trail went cold. For 3 months, the detectives chased shadows, interviewing anyone who had spoken to the victim in the weeks leading up to his death. But there were no leads. The file on Yang Tianyong was beginning to gather dust. Then, the darkness returned. In July 1997, the police station received another missing person report. This time, the missing man was not a civilian driver, but a figure of authority. His name was Mr. Zhou, a security officer working for a local agricultural tool factory. Mr. Zhou was a creature of habit. He went to work, he did his rounds, and he went home. When he vanished without a trace, his family knew immediately that something was wrong. The police retraced his steps, focusing their attention on the factory. It was a closed environment, a place where everyone knew everyone. Detectives grilled the factory workers, but the timeline was airtight. Mr. Zhou worked on the perimeter, while the other laborers were deep inside the plant. No one had seen him leave. No one had seen a struggle. It was as if he had simply evaporated into the humid Yunnan air. Without a body or a crime scene, the police were stuck. Was it a voluntary disappearance? Did Mr. Zhou simply walk away from his life? It was a plausible theory, until a few days later, when a truck driver pulled over to the side of a remote road to relieve himself. Looking down into a drainage ditch overgrown with weeds, the driver saw the unmistakable shape of a human body. The police arrived and confirmed the worst. It was Mr. Zhou. The condition of the body mirrored the brutality of the first case. He had been stabbed repeatedly in the chest and abdomen. Near the body, investigators found a discarded dagger. It had been wiped clean, devoid of fingerprints, and tossed carelessly next to the corpse, a gesture of arrogance. But what was missing from the scene was far more terrifying than what was found. Mr. Zhou was an armed security officer. He carried a standard issue Type 54 pistol, a powerful handgun known for its stopping power. The gun was gone. The serial number 2902326 was immediately flagged in the national database. The detectives stood by the muddy ditch, realizing the stakes had just escalated dramatically. The forensic reconstruction of the murder suggested a team of at least 2 or 3 attackers. One had likely restrained Mr. Zhou from behind, locking his arms, while a second assailant delivered the fatal stab wounds from the front. It was a coordinated, military-style takedown. There were no signs of a struggle in the surrounding grass. Mr. Zhou had been killed elsewhere and dumped here like garbage. The pieces were starting to form a terrifying picture. A taxi driver killed with professional efficiency. A security guard executed and stripped of his firearm. Somewhere in Kunming, a group of men was operating with the discipline of soldiers and the cruelty of butchers. And now they were armed with a police-issue handgun. The investigators lost sleep. They worked through the nights, fueled by cigarettes and adrenaline, knowing that a stolen gun is never taken as a trophy. It is taken to be used. Their fears were realized in September 1997. A private driver named Tao, who worked for a high-ranking city official, vanished along with his vehicle, a pristine Mitsubishi sedan. Suspicions initially fell on Tao himself. Had he stolen the luxury car and fled across the border? But those who knew him shook their heads. Tao was honest, humble, and deeply serious about his job. He was not a thief. The police connected the dots. Another driver, another missing vehicle, but this time the target was high profile. The pattern was becoming undeniable, but the police were always one step behind. They were chasing ghosts who left no fingerprints, no witnesses, and no trace. And then came the night of November 14th, 1997. The violence finally spilled out into the open, and the city of Kunming would never be the same. It was late at night, the streets quiet and dark. A patrol team from the Kunming Public Order Squad was making their rounds. These were tough officers, men tasked with keeping the peace in a rapidly modernizing city. As they cruised through the shadows, they spotted something suspicious, a theft in progress. A group of men was attempting to break into a vehicle. The three officers did not hesitate. They grabbed their batons and sprinted toward the thieves, shouting for them to surrender. In a normal situation, car thieves scatter like cockroaches when the police arrive. They run, they hide. But these men did not run. As the officers closed the distance, the window of a nearby car rolled down. From the darkness of the cabin, the muzzle of a gun flashed. Bang, bang. The sound was deafening in the quiet street. Two of the officers dropped instantly, struck in the head with terrifying accuracy. They died before they hit the pavement. The third officer, stunned and exposed, fell into a coma from the trauma of the assault. The gunfire echoed through the neighborhood. A nearby official, hearing the commotion, heroically ran toward the scene to assist. He never made it. The gunmen turned their aim on him, firing 2 shots directly into his chest. He collapsed and died at the scene. The gunmen sped away, disappearing into the night. When the smoke cleared, the forensic teams descended on the blood-soaked street. They recovered the shell casings and ran the ballistics. The results hit the department like a physical blow. The bullets had been fired from a Type 54 pistol. The serial number matched. It was the gun stolen from Mr. Zhou, the murdered security guard, months earlier. The realization was horrifying. The murders were not random. They were connected. The gang had killed Mr. Zhou specifically to get the gun, and now they were using that gun to slaughter police officers. The surviving officer, though critically injured, could offer little help. He had not seen their faces clearly. In the chaos, he recalled hearing a mix of voices shouting, commands, some of which sounded like they were spoken in a different regional dialect. It was a thin lead, but it was all they had. The audacity of the attack sent shockwaves through the command center. To shoot a police officer is a grave crime. To execute 2 of them with headshots in a moving engagement implies a level of training that terrified the authorities. These were not desperate junkies with a stolen piece. These were marksmen. The city went on high alert. Checkpoints were established. Raids were conducted. The police vowed to catch these cop killers. But as the pressure mounted, the gang did exactly what professional predators do. They went dormant. They knew the heat was on, so they vanished into the population, silent and invisible. For months, the city held its breath. The investigation stalled, hitting wall after wall. Then, more than 6 months later, in April 1998, the silence broke, and it broke with the sound of gunfire. A resident in a quiet residential district noticed a police van parked awkwardly on the street. Inside, the scene was a slaughterhouse. 2 officers, Wang Zhenbo and Wang Xiao, lay dead. They had been executed with the same cold efficiency as the others, gunshots to the head. The killer's objective was immediately obvious. The officers' holsters were empty. Their service weapons, a new set of firearms, had been stripped from their bodies. The message was clear. The gang was restocking their arsenal. They were hunting police not just to eliminate threats, but to farm them for equipment. The Kunming police were no longer just the investigators. They were the prey. The psychological toll on the force was immense. Every traffic stop, every shadow in an alley could be an ambush. The killers had proven they could strike anywhere, anytime, and that they had the skills to win a gunfight against trained officers. Following this double homicide, the violence accelerated. The gang seemed to lose all fear. Between March of 1999 and May of the year 2000, the frequency of their attacks reached a fever pitch. In just over a year, 9 more incidents occurred. The pattern became a grim ritual. A car would vanish. The driver would vanish. Sometimes the bodies were found dumped in remote ditches. Sometimes they were never found at all. The gang was targeting high-end vehicles, likely to sell them on the black market to fund their operations. They killed everyone. Men, women, drivers, passengers. They left no witnesses. They were ghosts on the highway. Let us pause for a moment to truly understand the scale of this carnage. To keep the timeline clear in your mind, consider the progression of these atrocities. First, in April 1997, the taxi driver Yang Tianyong was bludgeoned and stabbed. This was the practice run. 3 months later, in July, security guard Zhou was murdered for his Type 54 pistol. Then, in September, the government driver Tao vanished with his Mitsubishi. In November, the gang used Zhou's gun to execute 2 patrol officers and a city official in a street shootout. They waited until April 1998 to ambush officers Wang Junbo and Wang Xiao, stealing more guns. And finally, the spree from 1999 to the year 2000, 9 separate cases of robbery and murder. These were just the cases the police knew about. The true number of victims buried in the hills surrounding Kunming was a dark question mark that haunted the investigators. The city was paralyzed by fear. Drivers refused to take passengers at night. Police officers patrolled in convoys. But criminals, no matter how disciplined, eventually make a mistake. Arrogance is a flaw that not even military training can fully suppress. In June of the year 2000, a tiny crack appeared in the gang's armor. It did not come from a grand shootout or a brilliant deduction by a detective. It came from a single electronic signal. On June 14th, police investigators were monitoring the phone records of a victim named Wang Xuan, a car owner who had vanished along with his vehicle in April. For months, his mobile phone had been silent, likely destroyed or discarded. But then, suddenly, the network lit up. The phone was active. A call had been made. The signal was traced to a pawn shop in a distinct district of Kunming. The detectives stared at the location data, their hearts racing. This was the first solid lead in 3 years. A team was scrambled immediately. They moved with speed and silence, surrounding the pawn shop, weapons drawn, ready for war. Inside the shop, they did not find a heavily armed paramilitary squad. Instead, they found a young couple arguing with the pawnshop clerk. The man was holding a mobile phone, the very phone that belonged to the missing victim, Wang Shan. The clerk was refusing to take the phone. "It won't turn on," the clerk argued. "I can't buy a broken phone." The man, frustrated and impatient, snapped. "It works fine." To prove his point, he powered up the device and dialed a random number, holding it up to show the screen lighting up. He was desperate for the cash, urging the clerk to hurry up. He had no idea that this moment of impatience was the end of the line. 10 minutes later, as the couple left the shop, a swarm of officers descended upon them. They were tackled, handcuffed, and thrown into the back of a squad car before they could even process what was happening. The man was identified as Chai Guoli. He was 26 years old. In the interrogation room, the atmosphere was heavy. Chai Guoli sat handcuffed to a metal chair, sweating under the harsh lights. He played the role of the innocent citizen perfectly. "I found it," he pleaded. "I was walking home from work. It was on the sidewalk. I just picked it up. I didn't know whose it was." He claimed greed got the better of him. He wanted to pawn it for some quick cash. It was a standard lie, one the police heard every day. But the detectives pressed him on a specific detail. "If you just found it," the interrogator asked, leaning in close, "why did you refuse to turn it on for the pawnshop clerk at first?" Chai Guoli stammered. I was afraid the owner's name might pop up on the screen and the clerk would know it wasn't mine." The detectives exchanged glances. It was a clever answer, but his body language screamed deception. They pushed harder. They bluffed. They told him they had witnesses, that they had video, that they knew everything. Chai Guoli's composure cracked. He tried to bargain. "If I tell you the truth," he whispered, "will you promise not to punish me too severely?" The detectives nodded, offering false assurances. "Just tell us the truth." "Okay," Chai Guoli said. "I didn't find it. I bought it. I bought it from a thief for a cheap price, but I didn't like the model, so I tried to resell it. It was a clumsy lie. If he had bought it to use, why hadn't he used it? Why were there no calls on the record until today? The police saw the panic in his eyes. They knew they had him. They drilled into him for hours, dismantling his stories one by one, until finally the dam broke. Chai Guoli slumped in his chair, defeated. He looked up at the officers, and the confession that came out of his mouth would chill them to the bone. He wasn't just a fence for stolen goods. He was a member of a tightly knit killing squad. He gave up a name, the name of the leader who had orchestrated this 3-year reign of terror. His name is Yang Tianyong, Chai Guoli said. The police checked the name against their databases, expecting a career criminal or a thug. What they found left them stunned. Yang Tianyong was not a common gangster. He was a former police officer. The interrogation room was cold, but the detectives sweating through their shirts felt a heat that had nothing to do with the temperature. Chai Guoli, the man caught with the missing victim's phone, was unraveling. The name he had just whispered, Yang Tianyong, hung in the air like toxic smoke. For the investigators, this name was not just a lead. It was a betrayal. Yang Tianyong was not a stranger to law enforcement. He was a former railway police officer, a man who had once worn the uniform, sworn the oath, and carried the badge. The realization that the mastermind behind the city's most brutal cop-killing spree was one of their own, an ex-insider who knew their tactics, their shifts, and their weaknesses shook the department to its core. Chai Guoli, seeing that there was no turning back, opened the floodgates. He began to outline the structure of a criminal organization so disciplined and ruthless that it made standard street gangs look like amateurs. According to Chai, the gang consisted of 8 core members. Yang Tianyong was the undisputed general, the alpha who commanded absolute loyalty through fear and charisma. Between 1997 and the year 2000, this 8-man death squad had stolen 25 motor vehicles, but the theft was merely a byproduct of their bloodlust. Chai Guoli confessed that the gang had murdered 19 people. The detectives listened in stunned silence as he listed the victims. Among the dead were 3 active-duty police officers, 3 public order enforcers, 1 security guard, 1 active-duty soldier, and a military veteran. 9 of the 19 victims were men with combat training or self-defense skills. These were not easy targets. These were men who knew how to fight, men who carried weapons, men who were trained to survive. Yet they had been slaughtered with ease. This revelation confirmed the theory that had haunted the task force for months. The killers were not just lucky, they were highly trained. They executed their ambushes with military precision, targeting the head and chest, double-tapping their victims to ensure there were no survivors. It was not just murder, it was tactical elimination. But Chai Guoli was not finished. He leaned in, his voice trembling as he described the gang's disposal methods. This was not a simple case of robbery and homicide. The cruelty was theatrical. He spoke of dismemberment, of bodies vanishing into the earth, and in one particularly nausea-inducing detail, he mentioned that some victim remains had been cooked to feed the gang's dogs. It was a level of depravity that bordered on the satanic. The police had heard enough. They had the name. They had the location. Now, they needed to cut the head off the snake. A massive task force was mobilized immediately. This was not a standard arrest warrant execution. This was a raid on a fortified position held by a man who hunted police for sport. Nearly 100 heavily armed officers surrounded Yang Tianyong's residence in the dead of night. Snipers took positions on adjacent rooftops. Assault teams stacked up at the entry points. The order was clear: proceed with extreme caution. They expected a firefight. They expected the suspect to go down shooting, taking as many officers with him as possible. The team breached the door, swarming into the house with overwhelming force. But the final stand never happened. Yang Tianyong, the monster who had terrorized Kunming for 3 years, did not reach for a weapon. He was taken into custody without a single shot being fired. Perhaps he knew the odds were impossible, or perhaps his arrogance led him to believe he could talk his way out of it. Whatever the reason, the man who had shown no mercy to his victims surrendered with a chilling calmness. When investigators began to tear his home apart, they realized just how dangerous the situation had been. Yang Tianyong's house was not a home. It was an armory. Hidden within the residence, police found a stockpile of weaponry that could have equipped a small platoon. They recovered 12 military-grade grenades. They found 400 rounds of pistol ammunition and 500 rounds of automatic rifle ammunition. There were nearly 2.5 pounds of gunpowder and various detonators. The grenades were traced back to a theft committed by one of the gang members during his military service. But the most damning evidence lay in the firearms. Wrapped carefully and hidden away, the police found the Type 54 pistol, serial number 290-2326. It was the gun stolen from Mr. Zhou, the murdered security guard, in July of 1997. They also found the Type 77 pistol that had been ripped from the holster of Officer Wang, the policeman executed in the van in 1998. The ballistics matched. The serial numbers matched. The circle was closed. In the days that followed, the police moved with lightning speed, using the intel from Chai Guoli and the evidence from Yang's home to roll up the rest of the network. The 6 remaining members of the gang were hunted down and arrested one by one. As the squad room began to fill with the mugshots of the 8 perpetrators, a disturbing pattern emerged. These men were not the desperate, impoverished drifters usually associated with violent crime. They were not junkies looking for their next fix. They all held steady jobs. They had homes. They had families. On the surface, they were functioning members of society, but they had been corrupted, seduced, and radicalized by one man, Yang Tianyong. To understand the horror of the Kunming serial murders, one must understand the architect of the chaos. Who was Yang Tianyong? How did a man sworn to protect the public become its most prolific butcher? Yang Tianyong was born in 1959 in Chushong City, Yunnan Province. From a young age, he was physically imposing. Standing nearly 6 feet tall, he towered over his peers in a region where the average height was significantly shorter. He was strong, athletic, and intelligent. In his youth, Yang seemed destined for a life of disciplined service. He joined the military, where he excelled. The army environment suited him. It rewarded his physical strength and his natural aggression. Most importantly, it was where he discovered his prodigal talent for marksmanship. Yang was not just a good shot. He was a sniper-level marksman. He understood firearms. He understood ballistics. And he understood the power that a gun bestowed upon the holder. After leaving the army, Yang Tianyong transitioned into law enforcement. He was assigned to the Railway Police Bureau in Kunming. Initially, he appeared to be a model officer. He was efficient and capable, but beneath the surface, a rot was beginning to set in. Yang was a man of immense ego. He felt superior to those around him, and he quickly grew bored with the repetitive, mundane nature of police work. The thrill of the uniform faded, replaced by a simmering resentment. He eventually requested a transfer and was moved to a position as a prison guard at a local detention center. This transfer, meant to be a fresh start, was the beginning of the end. Working in the prison system, surrounded by criminals, Yang's discipline evaporated. He became lazy, arrogant, and negligent. He openly expressed his disdain for the job and his superiors. His attitude became so toxic, and his dereliction of duty so flagrant, that the department eventually had no choice. Yang Tianyong was fired. For a man like Yang, this was not a professional setback. It was a declaration of war. He did not blame himself for his termination. In his twisted narcissism, he blamed the system. He blamed the police force that had betrayed him. He felt that society had failed to recognize his genius. The shame of losing his badge curdled into a deep, homicidal hatred. He didn't just want to commit crimes, he wanted to punish the establishment that had rejected him. Stripped of his uniform, Yang Tianyong decided that if he could not be the law, he would be the force that destroyed it. He began to plan his revenge, but he knew he could not do it alone. He needed soldiers. He needed men who were capable of violence, but desperate enough to follow orders without question. He began to scour the city, looking for the discarded, the angry, and the cruel. In 1994, fate brought him an old friend. Zhao Lin was a childhood classmate of Yang Tianyong. Like Yang, Zhao Lin had a background that should have led to a decent life. He had served in the army, gaining tactical experience, but Zhao Lin was fundamentally flawed. He was lazy, greedy, and prone to taking shortcuts. After leaving the military, he had moved to the heavy industrial region of northeast China to start a business. The business failed miserably. Instead of working his way out of debt, Zhao Lin turned to fraud. He scammed multiple victims, amassing a significant amount of money through deceit. When the law began to close in, he was placed on the national wanted list. A fugitive on the run, Zhao Lin fled all the way back to Yunnan province, hiding in the shadows of Kunming with nearly 1 million yuan, roughly $120,000 in stolen cash. When Yang Tianyong reconnected with his old friend, he did not see a criminal on the run. He saw an opportunity. Yang learned of Zhao Lin's fraudulent past and the massive sum of money he had stolen. A normal citizen or a moral former police officer would have reported the fugitive. Yang did the opposite. He was impressed. He admired Zhao Lin's audacity and his ability to acquire wealth through illegal means. "You have talent," Yang told him, "but you are thinking too small." Yang invited Zhao Lin to join his burgeoning organization. It was a meeting of dark minds. Zhao Lin brought capital and a lack of conscience. Yang brought tactical brilliance and a vision of organized terror. With Zhao Lin as his lieutenant, the gang began to take shape. They recruited others, specifically targeting men with military backgrounds. They wanted muscle, but they also wanted discipline. Yang ran his gang like a special forces unit. He drilled them on combat tactics. He taught them how to withstand interrogation. He showed them how to engage targets in close quarters. They were not a street gang. They were a paramilitary cell operating inside a major city. Their early activities were brutal but relatively low profile. They bullied locals, extorted money, and forced young men in their village to join their ranks under the threat of death. Yang's rule was absolute. He made it clear that joining the gang was a one-way ticket. "If you join," he told them, "you are family. If you leave, you are a corpse. And if you hesitate, I will kill your entire family." This terror kept the members in line. They knew Yang was capable of anything. In 1995, the gang hit a snag that would alter their trajectory forever. Yang Tianyong, eager to arm his men, attempted to purchase guns on the black market. He was caught in a police sting operation. He was arrested and charged with illegal purchase of firearms. However, through connections and perhaps the leniency of the time, he managed to get bailed out after paying a fine of 30,000 yuan, or about $3,600. For Yang, this arrest was a humiliation. It was a reminder that the police could still touch him. It was also a strategic lesson. Buying guns was risky. It left a paper trail. It involved trusting strangers who could be informants. Yang Tianyong came to a chilling conclusion. He gathered his men and laid out the new doctrine. "We will not buy guns anymore," he declared. "Buying guns costs money and gets us caught. From now on, we will take them." He looked at his men, his eyes cold and dead. "We will kill the police. We will take their weapons. We will leave no witnesses. A dead man cannot testify. A dead man cannot identify you in a lineup." It was the crossing of the Rubicon. The decision was made to transition from armed robbery to systematic execution. In early 1997, Yang Tianyong traveled to Pingyuan Street, a notorious hub for illegal goods, to secure a few initial weapons to start their war. He called upon another associate, a man named Yang Ming, to return to Yunnan and join the core team. The stage was set. The team was assembled. The philosophy of kill everyone, leave no trace was codified. Their first target for this new phase of terror was chosen carefully. They needed a vehicle, a fast, reliable car, to serve as their mobile command post. On April 6, 1997, Shaolin and several accomplices were prowling the streets of Kunming, hunting for the perfect car. They spotted a vehicle parked near a gymnasium. It was the Jeep belonging to Yang Tianyong. The driver, Yang Tianyong, was busy arranging items in the back seat, his back turned to the world, completely unaware that he was about to become the first casualty in a war he didn't know existed. Shaolin signaled the attack. The gang members rushed forward, moving silently and swiftly. Before the driver could turn around, heavy blows rained down on the back of his head. He crumpled instantly. But the gang remembered Yang Tianyong's orders. No witnesses. As Yang Tianyong lay unconscious, the gang members drew their daggers. They stabbed him repeatedly in the chest and stomach, ensuring that he would never wake up. They shoved his body into the back of the Jeep, climbed into the driver's seat, and sped away. They drove the stolen Jeep to a nearby residential parking lot, rifled through the victim's bags, and found 20,000 yuan, roughly $2,400 in cash. They took the money, wiped the car down, and vanished. It was their first kill as a unit. The rush of adrenaline, the ease with which they had taken a life, and the financial reward intoxicated them. They returned to Yang Tianyong with the news. Yang was pleased. The plan worked. The execution was flawless. But he identified a weakness in their operation. They had used knives and blunt objects. It was messy. It was close range. To take on the police, to take on armed security guards, they needed superior firepower. "We need guns," Yang said. "Real guns." And so, the sights were set on their next target, the security officer, Mr. Zhou. In early July of 1997, Yang Tianyong and his crew spotted a new opportunity. They stole a car from a factory parking lot in Kunming. As they were attempting to flee the scene, they were intercepted. Mr. Zhou, the diligent security officer, approached the vehicle. He was doing his job, checking on suspicious activity. He saw the men in the car and signaled for them to stop. Yang Tianyong, Shaolin, and a third accomplice smiled at the officer. They didn't panic. They played it cool. They lured him closer, perhaps pretending to be lost or claiming to be employees. "Officer, can you help us?" As soon as Mr. Zhou leaned in, the trap snapped shut. They dragged him into the vehicle, sandwiching him in the back seat. The man sitting behind him clamped a hand over his mouth and drove a dagger into his chest. Mr. Zhou fought, but he was outnumbered and trapped in a moving metal cage. He died choking on his own blood. Yang Tianyong reached over the dead body and unholstered the prize, the Type 54 pistol and 3 rounds of ammunition. He held the cold steel in his hand, feeling the weight of the power it represented. This was what they needed. They drove to a secluded stretch of road and dumped Mr. Zhou's body into a drainage ditch, tossing the murder weapon, the bloody knife, into the mud beside him. To them, the knife was trash. They had graduated. With a stolen car and a stolen police gun, the gang was now fully operational. They modified the stolen vehicle, swapping out license plates to make it untraceable. This car would become their hearse, a vessel of death that would prowl the highways of Yunnan. In August, they stole another car from in front of a guest house. In September, they murdered another driver, selling his vehicle for 180,000 yuan, over $21,000. The money was pouring in. The blood was flowing. Then came November. They were feeling invincible. They were stealing a Jeep in the Kunming development zone when the 3 public order officers spotted them. Most criminals would have surrendered. 3 against 3. But Yang Tianyong's men were armed with the Type 54. When the officers charged with their batons, the gang didn't flinch. They raised the stolen gun and fired. 2 headshots. 2 dead officers, the gang escaped, leaving carnage in their wake. But rather than going into hiding, this firefight emboldened them. They realized that the police were not invincible. They realized they could win. They decided to escalate. They would no longer wait for targets to appear. They would create their own traps. Yang Tianyong acquired police uniforms. He bought handcuffs, gloves, and reflective vests. He began to drill his men on police procedure. He taught them the standard hand signals for traffic stops. He taught them how to stand, how to speak, and how to approach a driver with that specific arrogance that commands obedience. They were going to impersonate the very people they were hunting. They hit the highways dressed as cops. They set up fake checkpoints on remote stretches of road. Unsuspecting drivers would see the uniforms, see the red batons waving them down, and pull over, thinking they were safe. They would roll down their windows, expecting a ticket or a routine check. Instead, they looked down the barrel of a gun. The transition was complete. Yang Tianyong and his disciples were no longer just opportunistic thieves. They were a specialized hunting pack, and they had perfected their camouflage. By dressing in police uniforms, they weaponized the trust of the public. In China, as in many places, the sight of a police officer signals safety, authority, and order. When a driver sees a uniformed figure standing by a patrol car, waving a baton, the instinct is to comply. It is an automatic social contract. Yang Tianyong exploited this contract to lure victims directly into their graves. In April of 1998, the gang spotted their next target. It was a police van, occupied by 2 officers, Wang Junbo and Wang Zhao. For most criminals, a vehicle containing 2 armed law enforcement agents is a threat to be avoided at all costs. For Yang Tianyong, it was a resupply crate. The details of the confrontation were sharp and brutal. Utilizing their stolen uniforms and perhaps the element of surprise that comes when a police officer sees another officer approaching, the gang closed the distance. Before Wang Junbo and Wang Zhao could react, before they could reach for their radios or their holsters, the air exploded with gunfire. The gang did not fire warning shots. They aimed for the head. The 2 officers were executed in their seats, their lives extinguished in a fraction of a second. As the smoke cleared, the gang members moved in with practiced efficiency. They did not panic. They reached into the van and stripped the dead officers of their service weapons. In a matter of moments, they had acquired another Type 54 pistol and a Type 77 pistol. They vanished into the landscape, leaving behind 2 grieving families and a police force that was rapidly realizing they were at war with a phantom enemy. With their arsenal growing, the gang's ambition expanded. They began to look beyond the borders of Kunming. In October of 1998, they set their sights on a larger prize. They hijacked a transport vehicle, taking the driver captive. This particular crime highlighted the utter inhumanity of their disposal methods. After seizing the vehicle, they drove to a remote industrial area. There, they found an active lime kiln, a massive, high-temperature furnace used for baking limestone. With the driver likely subdued or unconscious, they tossed him into the inferno. The body was incinerated, leaving absolutely no trace for forensic pathologists to find. The vehicle was then driven north, all the way to the city of Shenyang, nearly 2,000 miles away. There, they sold it on the black market for 200,000 yuan, which was roughly 24,000 United States dollars at the time. Flush with cash and emboldened by their ability to travel and sell stolen goods across provinces without detection, the gang went on a rampage. Over the next 2 months, they widened their scope. They were no longer satisfied with just hijacking cars on the highway. They began targeting gold shops and jewelry stores in Yunnan and the neighboring provinces. They struck fast and hard, smashing display cases, terrifying staff, and disappearing before the local authorities could scramble a response. They were operating with total impunity. But as 1999 arrived, the violence took a darker, more sadistic turn. The motive shifted from purely financial gain to something more perverse. The gang members, particularly Yang Tianyong and Shaolin, began to indulge in the act of domination for its own sake. On the night of March 6, 1999, at approximately 9:30 in the evening, the gang was patrolling the streets of Kunming, hunting for prey. They spotted a Nissan sedan parked on the side of the road. Inside were a man and a woman, likely a couple enjoying a private moment. The gang pulled up, their police lights flashing in the dark. They stepped out in their stolen uniforms, tapping on the glass. The couple inside, believing they were being approached by the authorities for a parking violation or a routine check, unlocked the doors. It was the last mistake they would ever make. The gang swarmed the car. They dragged the man out and beat him savagely with heavy clubs. The violence was excessive and frenzied. They crushed his skull, killing him by the roadside. But for the female passenger, the horror was prolonged. The gang members, hiding behind the facade of law enforcement, subjected her to a brutal collective sexual assault. After they had satisfied their vile urges, they strangled her until she stopped breathing. The bodies were disposed of, the car was taken, and the gang returned to the shadows, leaving a void where 2 lives had been just moments before. The frequency of the attacks accelerated. They were killing with a rhythm now, a heartbeat of violence that pulsed through the city. In June of 1999, Yang Tianyong and Shaolin were eating at a roadside restaurant when they spotted a brand new Mitsubishi sedan. It was a pristine, high-value target. They noted the license plate and followed the driver. The next day, they set the trap. Dressed once again in their police uniforms, they intercepted the vehicle. The driver, seeing the official attire, pulled over without hesitation. As soon as the window came down, the officer struck. A heavy blow knocked the driver unconscious. This time, they did not kill the victim immediately at the scene. They bound his hands, threw a hood over his head, and shoved him into the back of their car. They drove him to a rented house in the suburbs of Kunming, a safe house that had been converted into a slaughterhouse. Inside the grim confines of this rental property, they strangled the driver with a rope. It was a slow, intimate method of killing, requiring strength and a complete lack of empathy. But what happened after the victim died would become the most infamous detail of the entire investigation, a detail that shocked even the hardened detectives of the Serious Crimes Unit. Shaolin, the man who had once been a failed businessman and a fraudster, took charge of the body. He picked up an axe. In the bathroom of the rented house, Shaolin dismembered the victim. He chopped the body into pieces with the detached precision of a butcher. But disposal was always the problem. Burying a body takes time and effort. Leaving it exposes evidence. So, Shaolin devised a solution that was as practical as it was monstrous. He took the lower portions of the victim's remains and placed them into a large industrial cooking pot. He added water and boiled the human flesh into a gruesome stew. Shaolin kept a pack of over 30 dogs at his residence. These animals were his guards, his pets, and now his accomplices in evidence disposal. He fed the cooked human remains to the dogs. He also dumped portions of the slurry into his fish ponds to feed the fish. The remaining hard bones and unconsumable parts were buried deep underground or scattered in remote locations. This was the first time they had cooked a victim. It marked a descent into absolute barbarism. They were not just killing people. They were erasing them from existence, turning them into animal feed. The psychological barrier that separates humans from monsters had been completely obliterated. The final act of this tragedy played out on May 31st. In the year 2000, the gang targeted a luxury Mercedes-Benz. The occupants were a man named Officer Chu, a policeman, and his friend, a recently discharged military veteran. These were 2 men who should have been difficult targets. They had training, they had situational awareness, but against the disguise of the uniform and the blitzkrieg tactics of Yang Tianyong's crew, they stood no chance. The gang ambushed them, likely using the same traffic stop ruse. Both men were murdered. The Mercedes-Benz, a symbol of wealth and status, was driven away to be sold, while the bodies of the two friends were disposed of in the darkness. When the police finally raided Yang Tianyong's home months later, after the breakthrough with the cell phone, they found something that gave them a window into the mastermind's twisted psyche. In his study, tucked away like a perverse library, the police found a dossier. It was a collection of files. Inside were handwritten notes, interrogation records, and signatures. Yang Tianyong had been keeping trophies. When he kidnapped victims, before he killed them, he would often conduct mock interrogations. He would force them to sign confessions or write down their personal details. He played the role of the police officer until the very end, extracting information and fear from his captives before ordering their execution. He derived pleasure not just from the killing, but from the process of domination. To him, crime was not just a business. As he would later tell the investigators with a terrifying smirk, "It was my hobby." The final tally of their crimes was staggering. The investigation confirmed that the gang had committed 25 major felonies. They had stolen assets worth more than 3,700,000 yuan, nearly 450,000 United States dollars. But the human cost was the true metric of their evil. 19 people were dead, 19 families were destroyed, and one survivor was left with life-altering injuries. For years, the Kunming police had been chasing ghosts. They had been outmaneuvered at every turn because they were looking for criminals who acted like criminals. They were not prepared for criminals who acted like soldiers, thought like cops, and disposed of bodies like waste management professionals. The gang was cunning. They were disciplined. They understood forensic science. They knew how to clean a crime scene, how to avoid leaving fingerprints, and how to scatter evidence across different jurisdictions to confuse local authorities. They changed their license plates constantly. They moved their safe houses. They never stayed in one pattern for too long. However, even the most disciplined sociopaths have a breaking point. Yang Tianyong's arrogance, his belief that he was untouchable, eventually filtered down to his subordinates. And it was that arrogance, the belief that they could act without consequence, that led Chai Guoli to turn on that cell phone in the pawn shop. When the police finally sat across from Yang Tianyong in the interrogation room, they expected a monster who would scream and fight. Instead, they found a man who was eerily calm. He looked at them with the cold, dead eyes of a shark. He did not deny the crimes. In fact, he seemed almost proud of them. When the investigators asked him about the brutality of his methods, about the innocent people he had slaughtered, he showed no remorse. He viewed his victims not as human beings, but as cattle. To him, they were resources to be harvested for their cars, for their guns, for their money. But there was one moment where the mask slipped, just for a second, when the detectives mentioned that Chai Guoli had been the one to crack, the one who had sold them out for a promise of leniency. Yang Tianyong let out a cynical laugh. He looked at his former colleagues, the men wearing the uniform he had once worn, and he offered a final, chilling piece of wisdom. "If one person gets caught," Yang said, his voice steady and devoid of emotion, "then everyone gets caught. Resistance is pointless. I know how this works." He knew because he had been on the other side of the table. He knew the procedures. He knew that once the first domino fell, the entire structure would collapse. He had built a fortress of fear, but it was built on the loyalty of thieves. And in the end, that loyalty was cheaper than a stolen cell phone. The legal system moved swiftly. There was no need for a long, drawn-out trial. The evidence was overwhelming. The stockpile of weapons, the cooked remains, the stolen cars, and the confessions of the 8 gang members painted a picture of guilt that no defense attorney could erase. On October 25th, in the year 2000, the verdict was handed down. 7 members of the gang, including the ringleader Yang Tianyong and his butcher lieutenant Shaolin, were sentenced to death. The court found that their crimes were extremely cruel, extremely dangerous to society, and devoid of any redeeming human quality. Only one member of the gang was spared the death penalty. This individual had participated in the robberies but had not taken part in the actual killings. He was sentenced to life in prison, a small mercy in a saga of absolute darkness. The date for the execution was set. The city of Kunming, which had lived in fear for 3 long years, prepared to watch the monsters die. The 17th of November, in the year 2000, dawned cold and gray over the city of Kunming. It was a day that the people of Yunnan province had been waiting for, with a mixture of grim anticipation and desperate relief. For 3 terrifying years, the shadow of Yang Tianyong and his gang of butchers had hung over the region like a storm cloud. They had turned the highways into killing fields and the police force into prey. But on this morning, the reign of terror was finally coming to an end. The legal process had been swift, a necessary response to crimes that had shaken the very foundations of public safety. On October 25th, just weeks before this final morning, the Intermediate People's Court of Kunming had delivered its verdict. The courtroom had been packed, the air thick with the grief of 19 families who had lost fathers, husbands, and sons. When the judge read the sentences, there was no hesitation. Yang Tianyong, the former police officer turned mastermind, Xiao Lin, the fraudster who had cooked human remains, and 5 of their most brutal accomplices were sentenced to death. They were also stripped of all political rights for life, a symbolic gesture to erase their standing as citizens of the People's Republic. The execution day was a public spectacle, a final demonstration that the law still held power. In the year 2000, execution protocols in China were often conducted with a degree of public visibility designed to deter future criminals. The streets leading to the execution ground were lined with crowds. Thousands of citizens gathered, pressing against the police barricades, craning their necks to catch a glimpse of the convoy. They did not come to mourn. They came to witness the destruction of a monster. Yang Tianyong, the man who had once worn the police uniform with pride, was now paraded before the city he had terrorized. Reports from the scene described a man who remained unsettlingly stoic. Even as he faced his own mortality, the arrogance that had defined his criminal career did not entirely vanish. He had lived by the gun, believing himself to be superior to the sheep he hunted. Now, surrounded by the armed officers he had so despised, he was forced to confront the ultimate reality of his choices. The convoy of trucks, carrying the 7 condemned men, wound its way through the city streets. The sirens wailed, a sound that usually signaled an emergency, but today signaled a funeral procession for the wicked. For the families of the victims, this moment was bittersweet. No execution could bring back Yang Tianyong, the taxi driver beaten to death in a parking lot. No bullet fired by the state could resurrect Mr. Zhou, the security guard whose murder had provided the gang with their first gun. The 2 police officers, Wang Junbo and Wang Xiao, executed in their van, would never return to their station. But there was a grim satisfaction in knowing that the men responsible would never draw another breath. When the convoy arrived at the execution ground, the atmosphere was heavy with the weight of the crimes committed. These men were not just thieves, they were desecrators of life. The details of their atrocities, the dismemberment, the feeding of human flesh to dogs, the calculated execution of law enforcement had stripped them of any public sympathy. They were viewed not as men, but as rabid animals that needed to be put down for the safety of the herd. The method of execution was the firing squad. It was a brutal, direct, and final conclusion, mirroring the violence the gang had inflicted upon their victims. As the shots rang out across the execution ground, the saga of the killer police gang was brought to a violent close. 7 lives were extinguished in an instant, ending the bloodiest chapter in the modern history of Kunming. However, as the smoke cleared and the bodies were taken away, the city was left to grapple with the disturbing questions that remained. The most haunting aspect of this case was not the violence itself, but the identity of the architect. Yang Tianyong was not a desperate product of poverty. He was not an uneducated thug from the underclass. He was a man of the system. He had been a soldier, a marksman, and a police officer. He understood the law, and he understood order. And yet, he had chosen chaos. His transformation from a protector of society to its most lethal predator is a terrifying case study in the fragility of morality. Investigators and psychologists who reviewed the case pointed to a deep-seated narcissism in Yang's personality. When he was fired from his job as a prison guard for negligence, he did not see it as a consequence of his own actions. He saw it as an insult. He viewed himself as a victim of a corrupt and ungrateful system. This perceived grievance festered, turning into a hatred for authority that was so intense it overrode all human empathy. He killed police officers not just to get their guns, but to punish the institution that had rejected him. Every officer he executed was a proxy for the superiors who had fired him. This motivation makes Yang Tianyong far more dangerous than a typical criminal. A robber wants your money. A psychopath might kill for a twisted thrill, but an ideological killer like Yang, driven by a vendetta against society itself, operates with a level of dedication that is hard to combat. He treated his gang like a military unit because, in his mind, he was at war. The revelation that the gang members were mostly employed, stable individuals also shattered the public's perception of what a criminal looks like. They were not hiding in the sewers. They were neighbors. They were co-workers. They were the people standing next to you in line at the grocery store. Shaolin, the man who committed the unthinkable act of cooking a victim, was a failed businessman, but a businessman nonetheless. They were ordinary men who allowed themselves to be seduced by the promise of easy money and the thrill of power offered by a charismatic psychopath. The legacy of the Yang Tianyong gang profoundly changed policing in southwest China. The ease with which the gang had impersonated officers forced a massive overhaul of police procedures. Uniforms were redesigned to be harder to counterfeit. Protocols for traffic stops were tightened. The management of police, firearms, and ammunition was subjected to rigorous new standards to ensure that a stolen gun could be tracked and reported immediately. The heavy price paid in blood by the Kunming police force eventually led to a more secure and disciplined system. But for the people who lived through it, the memories of those 3 years are hard to erase. The fear of driving alone at night, the suspicion of unmarked police cars, and the horror of the stories whispered about what happened in Shaolin's rental house lingered long after the executioner's rifles had gone silent. It is worth noting that in the final accounting of their crimes, the police recovered a staggering amount of stolen property. Yet, the material loss was insignificant compared to the human cost. 19 lives, 19 distinct universes of love, hope, and potential, all snuffed out because one man felt the world owed him something. The accomplice who received the life sentence, whose name has largely faded from history, serves as the only living remnant of the gang. He escaped death because he did not pull the trigger, but he will spend the rest of his natural life in a concrete box, contemplating the choices that led him into the orbit of a monster. Is life in prison a mercy, or is it a slower, more agonizing form of justice? That is a question for the philosophers. As we look back on the Kunming serial murder case from the safety of the present day, it serves as a stark reminder of the darkness that can hide behind a badge or a smile. It teaches us that evil does not always look like a monster. Sometimes it looks like a tall, athletic man with a military bearing, a man who once swore an oath to protect and serve, only to decide that he would rather rule in hell than serve in heaven. The mouse may fear the cat, and the thief may fear the police. But when the cat becomes the killer, when the protector becomes the predator, the entire natural order collapses. It took 3 years, 19 bodies, and the relentless work of a dedicated task force to restore that order. Yang Tianyong believed he could outsmart the system he once served. He believed he was the apex predator, but in the end, he was just another criminal standing against a wall, facing the consequences of his own hatred. Justice in Kunming was delayed, and it was bought at a terrible price, but it was, ultimately, delivered. The 19 souls lost to this madness can finally rest, knowing that the men who hunted them can never hurt anyone ever again. This case stands as one of the most disturbing examples of betrayal in criminal history. The idea that a former officer used his training to hunt his own colleagues is truly terrifying. It forces us to ask difficult questions about power, resentment, and the psychology of those we trust to protect us. I want to hear your thoughts on the sentencing. One member of the gang was spared the death penalty because he did not directly participate in the murders. Do you think he deserved a life sentence, or should he have faced the same fate as the others for being part of such a brutal organization? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this deep dive compelling, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more investigations into the world's most notorious true crime cases. Thank you for watching.